Good morning, everybody. How are you? This is Enrique, director and founder of Spanish United. This morning we have a very interesting guest from Louisiana. Would you feel kind enough to introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure, my name is William Canary Highland, but everyone knows me as Bill Hyland. I am the historian of Saint Bernard Civil Parish in Louisiana. In Louisiana, we do not have counties or condados. We have parroquias or parishes. And then I'm also in that capacity the site manager for Los Islenos Museum Complex.
Oh, awesome. Welcome for being on the show, Bill.
It's a pleasure and privilege to be with all of you.
Well, I was kind of surprised to, speak with you because I wasn't even aware that there were Islenos in the United States, because I know that the Islenos are known historically to have colonized many parts of the world, like primarily like in Latin America. But I didn't even know that there was a community here that was still active. So one of my administrators from my group by the name of Ivan, either he was the one that told me, why don't you contact them and recognize them as being part of the greater Hispanic diaspora? So I contacted you. I think you're doing a very wonderful thing by preserving the culture, especially, right now, which there's so much pressure on anyone that's a Spanish speaker to assimilate. I think it's very commendable what you and the museum is doing for the Isleño community in Louisiana.
Well, thank you so very much. We really started tilting with this windmill with Frank Fernandez. Frank Fernandez was a career educator. He had a master's degree in education from Tulane University, and he taught in the public schools of Saint Bernard Parish and later the private schools of our neighboring Plaquemine Parish. His father was from Galicia, from a town called Sala, which is near A Coruña.
Mm-hmm.
And his mother was Marta Guerra, and she was a Canaria, descendants of Canary Island colonists who came here in 1779 from Tenerife. And so Frank's first language was Spanish. Later, his father really believed in education. So Frank and his siblings were some of the first people, well, they were the first people from the fishing villages of San Bernardo to go to not only high school, but then to university. And Frank crusaded throughout his life to preserve the culture and the language as well of the Canary Island people, though particularly in his lifetime, he was born in 1918. He fought in World War II. He died in 2001. Particularly in his lifetime, there was this crushing emphasis to totally assimilate into the Anglo-American cultural identity and to forget your roots and to become ashamed of who you were. So Frank always fought against this, and the way that ultimately we were able to have some success was to show just how important we were, how important we are, and how the Isleños of Saint Bernard are part of a global phenomenon, as you mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And for instance, in the United States, San Antonio, Texas was founded by Canary Islanders, principally from Lanzarote in 1731. There have been Canary Islanders coming to the United States before and after the colonial period. And the reason, in a nutshell, that Canary Islanders came to Louisiana is that for the latter part of the 18th century, Louisiana, we were a colony of Spain. after the 7 Years' War, or the French and Indian War, Louisiana was divided in two. Everything east of the Mississippi River, with the exception of the Isla de Orleans, became English.
Mm-hmm.
The Isla de Orleans and everything west of the river became Spanish. And this was because you had two great grandsons of Louis XIV, reigning simultaneously in Spain and France. And there was a familial agreement between the two branches of the Bourbon family to support each other. When Spain came here, she learned very quickly that France had never really known what to do with us and really had refused to invest the financial resources and the human resources to firmly develop Louisiana as a French colony. So the upshot of it was that in the 1770 census, which the Spanish government ordered during the governorship of Alejandro O'Reilly, it was found that there were 13,000 Western European colonists, enslaved African people, and free people of color in all of Louisiana, from the Gulf of Mexico to Canada. Also, Spain was shocked to see that Anglo-Americans, and including people from Scotland and Ireland, who had established business interests on the Atlantic seaboard, had taken complete control of Louisiana's economy. Also, in 1771, Captain Philip Pittman published a book about Louisiana with a portfolio of maps showing the course of the river from the Gulf of Mexico to north of St. Louis, and explaining the different populations, how sparsely populated Louisiana was. France had established New Orleans, including the Isla de Orleans, or the Ile d'Orléans, had established New Orleans where she did because she knew that whoever held New Orleans controlled the mouth of the Mississippi. Mm-hmm. And whoever controlled the mouth of the river controlled access to the Mississippi River valley. So this is why Spain ultimately said, we will invest in New Orleans, in Louisiana, and we will develop Louisiana. And these were the words of Francisco Boligny, who came with O'Reilly, como un barrera contra los ingleses, a barrier to British colonial expansion west of the Mississippi River. Mm-hmm. So between 1777 and 1783, Spain recruited more than 3,000 Canary Islanders to come to Louisiana. And then, of course, as a result of the 7 Years' War, or the French and Indian War, Acadia, or Nova Scotia, was permanently lost to France. So many of the Acadians fled Nova Scotia and returned to France. And it was Spain who settled more than 2,500 Acadians, or as they're called today, Cajuns, mm-hmm. in Louisiana, again for the purpose of stopping British colonial expansion.
Mm. That's very interesting, because I knew that Louisiana, which is Louisiana Purchase, was part of France, but I didn't know that originally it was Spanish and then it became French afterwards.
It was French first. It was first colonized by the French, but then in the 1760s, at the end of the 7 years of the French and Indian War, Louisiana was divided into two. And the Isla de Orleans and everything west of the river went to Spain. And then everything east of the river, with the exception of the Isla de Orleans, which included the fledgling town of New Orleans, that was not included. But everything other than that, everything east of the river went to Great Britain. So that's why, for instance, Baton Rouge in 1779 was a British colony. That's why Mobile in Alabama was a British colony in 1780, and why Pensacola in 1781 was under the control of the British. And of course, it's very important to note that Governor Bernardo de Galvez, the governor in place when the Canary Islanders arrived here, Governor Galvez mounted the Galvez expedition. And in 1779, he captured Baton Rouge from the British. He defeated them in battle there. Natchez capitulated farther upriver in what is today Mississippi, all in 1779. In 1780, Mobile fell. And then in 1781, Galvez and a naval flotilla attacked and subdued Pensacola. And with the fall of Pensacola in 1781 came the destruction of the British presence of what would later become the Gulf Coast of the United States. And Canary Islanders fought under Galvez in that Galvez expedition. They were recruited to come here not only as colonists, but to serve in the Regimiento de Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
And so they actually saw military service with other Louisianians in the American Revolution.
Mm. Wow. Wow, that's really intense stuff. Like I said, this is all new to me. Like I said, when I think of Louisiana, I always associate it with, Cajuns, but, to me, this is like so refreshing to hear of a Spanish presence there.
And as I just pointed out to you, the majority of Cajuns who came here was settled in Louisiana at the expense of Charles III, the King of Spain.
Oh, wow. Okay. And the second part of my question I would like to ask you, as you know, Hispanophobia is a very recurrent problem in our country. And I wanted to ask you from your personal experience, have you experienced or seen Hispanophobia in Louisiana in your parish, where you are, and how do you think it can be addressed?
Well, first of all, in terms of this Hispanophobia, it's definitely something to be contended with. However, not in the parish of Saint Bernard that much. It's been here, but not that much. You have to remember that the parish of Saint Bernard, la parroquia de San Bernardo, the población de San Bernardo, was founded by Canarios. So that the Canary Island descendants have remained largely in control of Saint Bernard from the beginning. So one of the problems we had here in Saint Bernard was the perception that the Canarios were subsistence livers, that they lived off the land, that they were campesinos.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a problem. One of the interesting things, though, that occurred in the history of Saint Bernard is the neighbor to New Orleans on its eastern boundary. So as Spaniards were coming to the United States in the 19th century, they would meet the Canary Islanders, who were largely farmers and then later commercial fishermen. And they found this settlement of Spanish-speaking people. So many of them fled to Saint Bernard. They decided they didn't want to return to Spain. Spain was in constant turmoil following the invasion of Napoleon and his placing his brother, Jose Bonaparte, on the throne of Spain as Jose I. So that Spain never recovered in the 19th century or for the first part of the 20th century, really from that Spanish invasion, that invasion of Spain by the French. So there were many people wanting to come here. So we had Gallegos, Andalus, Valencianos, Catalanes, Asturianos, Extremeños, all coming to Saint Bernard. So they tended to reinforce the Spanish cultural and linguistic presence. But what was interesting, though, was that the idioma canaria had become so entrenched here that even the Gallegos, the Andalus, their children all spoke the idioma canaria.
Mm-hmm.
And then another thing that happened,
which is the Canary Island Spanish.
yes. And then another thing that happened here in this parish, the exact opposite of every other place in southern Louisiana. Throughout the remainder of southern Louisiana, the coastal areas, even the Native Americans became Gallicized. Here, even the French people became Hispanized. So that you had Nunez's marrying Ducros. You had Robin, Gilles Robin was one of the Acadians who settled in Saint Bernard in the late 18th century, one of the so-called Cajuns. He spoke nothing but French. His children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, and great-great, and so on, all married Canary Islanders. So today, when you see the descendants of Gilles Robin, they call themselves Robin, and they speak Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
Older people in the family.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I know we'll forget, if you don't mind my digressing a little bit.
Be my guest.
I know we'll forget years ago, I first went to see my grandfather's cousin, Tacito Perez. They were from the island of La Palma originally. And his wife was Malvina Robin. And Tío Tacito could speak French, English, and Spanish.
Oh, wow.
And at that time, I was more accustomed to speaking English and French. I was very young. So when Tata Chica started speaking to me, or Tia Chica started speaking to me, she spoke in Spanish, and I responded in French. So she looked at me and she said, "Mijo, entiende, atención, aquí no habla francés, aquí no habla inglés, aquí se habla español." And that's something that has, you know, really stayed with me throughout my life. And she was a wonderful, lovely lady.
Oh, wow.
So, anyway, but here in Saint Bernard, we had after in the early 60s, when there was desegregation in the Orleans, there were many people coming downhill from the city of New Orleans because they didn't want to live with black people. Mm-hmm. So of course, you know, those people would say that we were trash or that we were terrible or whatever. But then, you know, our response to them was that they were nothing but outsiders anyway, and that they would certainly go to another place. They were just here for a little while. And many of them were good people. They weren't all that way, but you know, that tended to be something of a problem. And then also, because of the state of Louisiana, just as use of the French language in public schools was proscribed throughout the state, the same phenomenon happened here in Saint Bernard with Spanish. But definitely though in the Orleans, as I've known different people in years previous, I know we'll forget one person whom I knew quite well, asked me, well, why was I so interested in Saint Bernard and how was I connected to, quote unquote, those people down there? Mm-hmm. Well, I said, I'm connected to those people down there because they are my relatives. They're related to me on the maternal side of my family. And they said, oh, well, we never knew that you were one of those Spanish N-words.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And I said, well, I have news for you. If that's what you think, that's what I am. And that was the end of the conversation, and we just went on to other things. And now these very same people, the children of these people who told me those things 40 years ago, now they come to our Isleño festival every year, and they just think it's wonderful. And they see people performing the folkloric music and dance of the islands, and they eat croquetas and empanadas and arroz con pollo and ropa vieja and all the things that we ate in addition to different seafood dishes.
Hmm.
So it's curious how things change.
Oh yeah, of course.
But
Yeah.
it's a great deal of perseverance.
Yeah,
And
I can imagine.
and one of the things that, that really bothered Frank Fernandez, and it has bothered me as well, is that we've largely lost the use of the idioma canaria in Saint Bernard. Yes, there are people who are septuagenarians, octogenarians, and older who still speak the idiom as their first language, but it's really just about died in the younger people. And one of the things that Frank Fernandez was able to do was not only get this museum complex established, which he began with the acquisition by parish government of Dupro Museum in 1971, and that was added to by the acquisition of property from the Molero family from Tenerife in 1980 and in 2000. But anyway, not only did we get that done, but then also he was able to work with Samuel Armistead and Manuel Alvar and different Spanish language scholars to get a lot of attention focused on the idiom in the 80s and 90s. For instance, Chelito Campo, the Campos were from Lanzarote Island. They came in 1779 here. Chelito spoke fluent Spanish, and Dr. Armistead recorded his Spanish and recorded many interviews with him. Of course, Irlan Perez was another person who was very close to Frank, and he performed decimas at Carnegie Hall. And do you know about the decima tradition here?
I'm not familiar with it, no.
All right. Decimas started as folk ballads and originally of 10 stanzas. And then they evolved over a period of time. And in the Canary Islands, sometimes they're called folkless. In the Caribbean, there are those who actually are familiar with the word decima. And those decimas were very important in recording our history because so many of our ancestors were illiterate.
Mm-hmm.
So these decimas recorded different events, different happenings, and they were almost always, very humorous. For instance, there's the Balsa de Boy Molero, the Boy Molero's fishing boat. And they said that the boat was so large that it extended from Chapatula Street in the city of New Orleans all the way to Shell Beach in Lake Bourne in Saint Bernard. So it was a 40-mile-long boat. And then it had so many lights that it was brighter than the Calle de Canal, or Canal Street, which was the main thoroughfare in the city of New Orleans. Mm-hmm. And this was because Boy he bragged a lot. So they were making fun of him. Then within the Isleno community, there were all of these rivalries. And we see that repeated to this day in the Canaries. So that the people who lived at La Isla de la Croix were called Islenos. The people who lived at Shell Beach were Shellbeacheros. The people who lived at Isclosky, were Isclosqueros. So those people and the Mexicanos, those people would all work on the fishing boat of Boy Molero. But when he came to El Torno, which is where the Canary Islanders first settled in Saint Bernard, none of those people would work with them because they had retained their farms and land grants from the 18th century. So they didn't necessarily associate with the subsistence level. Mm-hmm. But that one decima really paints quite a vibrant portrait of Boy Molero himself, and then the culture that he was part of. And there are hundreds of these decimas, which Samuel Armistead, Manuel Alvar, and others recorded. And then in terms of academic interest in this community, it really began with Alcé Faltier, who taught Romance languages at Tulane University at the end of the 19th century. In 1894, he published Louisiana Studies, and he really looks at the phenomenon of the language and talks about how there was some intrusion of French and French Creole and English, but that how pure the language was that was spoken by the elderly members of the community.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And my third question is, how do you feel that the museum can do its part in helping other Hispanics reach out to this Isleño community? Because there's a lot of Hispanics that are not even aware that there is a Canary Islander community in the United States. So it's like, do you do any type of outreach, or do you do like any type of community functions with other Hispanic groups that are wanting to embrace the Isleños as being part of the greater Hispanic community? How would you go about
Well,
that?
we have, for instance, for our Fiesta Isleña, which we do every year in March, we reach out to the Hispanic radio stations here and television, and we give interviews about what we're doing here and the history and the culture. It's definitely one of the areas where we need to do more. We need to do more to reach out, but having this museum complex is a wonderful thing, but we don't have endless funds. We don't have a lot of staff here. As a matter of fact, I'm the only paid staff. And then I have to coordinate building maintenance, all manner of different things, including these cultural programs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a pleasure for me to do the things that I do, but it's one of the areas where we need to reach out. And that's one of the reasons why, as soon as I saw that you'd written, I had to get in touch with you immediately, because I know it's one of the areas that we fail in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the things.
We welcome the presence of Cubans. As a matter of fact, we have Cubans who are members of our society who are Canary Island descendants. We have Venezuelans who are members of our society who are Canary Island descendants. And we welcome these people with open arms. And one of the things that we have been able to do recently, and we're going to push, is to try to revive the language. We've had a young student from Purdue University working on almost 100 oral history videotapes, all recorded in the Canarian idiom of Spanish. And we really hope to use that platform to begin a language revival. The other thing that we've been doing, we were completely destroyed by Katrina in 2005. We weren't able to reopen until 2010.
Oh, wow, that's a long time.
We got $3.1 million from FEMA, because this is public property. Saint Bernard Parish government-owned public property. We got $3.1 million FEMA dollars to rehabilitate the place. And then our nonprofit, Los Isleños Heritage and Cultural Society, raised another $600,000. So, and then one of the things that we've been able to do now, and it should be online finally in November, we have our Isleño website, and it will be bilingual in Spanish and English, with a glossary of the Isleño Spanish words. For instance, when you speak to Spaniards and you talk about fish, they'll say peces. Well, we say peje. And there are other Canarianisms like this, which will appear in the glossary that you'll find interesting.
Nice. I think it's very important that the Isleño community preserves its language and also to work with different Hispanic groups. So that's what I'm trying to do with my organization, Spanish United, is to establish cultural centers within the United States and to get Hispanic youth and Hispanic people to preserve their language because there's many parts of the country where the Hispanic population is so small that many of them are completely forgetting their heritage. They're assimilating into Anglo culture, and as time goes on, the identity starts to disappear. And I feel that there is a constant threat by both extremists on the left and the right that want to erase the Hispanic history of the United States, and that is something that should not be allowed because Spain, Latin America has a huge, rich culture in the United States. We've contributed a lot. We have done so much, but I feel that we reap little of the benefits and we don't get any type of recognition. So that's one thing that I'm doing with my organization is to fight for the recognition of Hispanic people, Hispanic contributions, and also to combat Hispanophobia through education, through dialogue, and through exchange, and to partner with other Hispanic organizations like your museum. I think that would be beneficial because it shows that there's other people that are willing to work with us that want to preserve the Spanish language and also to fight for the civil rights of Hispanic people and Isleño people in the United States. So I think you're doing a very wonderful job by trying to revive the Spanish language and do like cultural events because a lot of people that are Hispanic want to feel that they're part of something. That's very important.
Well, they're definitely a part of who we are. And, one of the things that I found so interesting, since Katrina, there's been a steady flow of Hispanic people to this region. They really were very important in rebuilding all these communities which were devastated by Katrina in 2005. And it's so nice when I see the high school students from Chalmette High here in Saint Bernard, and I would say maybe about 20% of that school population is Hispanic. And when they realize who these Isleños are and what we've done here, it's really something wonderful to see how thrilled they are that, again, they can identify with something that is absolutely pivotal to the development of this region. Without Spain, Louisiana would not celebrate and would not be able to project this image of cultural diversity, which has always been the hallmark of Louisiana. When you look at la cultura criolla in Louisiana, that cultura is the marriage of Western European influences with Native American and Western African influence.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so wherever you go in this region, there's this Creole cultural identity, which is nothing other than a very, very visible and very positive manifestation of diversity. And, it was very interesting. I remember some few years ago meeting Queen Sofia, the wife of Juan Carlos, the former king of Spain.
Oh, wow.
And Sofia looked at me and she was very charming. And she said, as I see Louisiana, I understand that diversity is not only its identity, but it is its great strength.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you.
So, and so we have to look at this. And then again, not only did Canarios come here, the mother of Jose Marti, the liberator of Cuba, was from Tenerife. By the way, they lived here in New Orleans for many years. Venezuela is facetiously called in the Canaries the eighth Canary Island because so many Canarios have been settling there since the late 15th century. And as a matter of fact, there's some sources that write that Simon Bolivar and Francisco Miranda maternally were Canarian descendants in part.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, you just look around you. Jose de Salazar, I mentioned this to you when we spoke, the first resident portrait painter in colonial New Orleans in the late 18th century. He was born in Mérida, and his mother was not only from Gran Canaria, but she also carried one of the names of the indigenous families, the families that lived in the islands before the conquest. And by the way, all of us have North African DNA. I have it, we all do.
Well, of course, because the Canary Islands, before it was colonized by the Peninsular Spaniards, there were North Africans. They're like Berbers and those people. So even though they became extinct, like what happened with Puerto Rico, Cuba, and Dominican Republic, the natives were mixed in with the Spaniards. So it's like you have it in the DNA, even though the people don't look at it, it's already there in the DNA.
Yeah, and actually, here in Saint Bernard, well, one of my families is Nunez de Villavicencio. They had been in Sevilla, and then in the 1490s, they went to Tenerife and lived in La Laguna. And the family is still there. They're branches of it there. But anyway, many of those people are very tall, with light eyes and light hair, and it turns out that they are descendants of a Berber group called Wanches, who were indeed very, very tall with light eyes and light hair. Some of them even had red hair.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about the Berbers in North Africa. A lot of people confuse them for Arabs, but they're actually their own separate group. They even have their own language. And many of them have like red hair, blue eyes, green eyes. I think a lot of it has to do with influence from Europe at one time, because what's interesting about North Africa is that North Africa, even before the Arabs conquered that area centuries ago, was always culturally related to the people of Mediterranean than they were to the rest of sub-Saharan Black Africa.
Right. Right. And then, as time went on, there was some mixing of the sub-Saharans too, sub-Saharan Africans. It's one of the interesting things. Have you ever heard of Leander Perez?
I have.
Yeah, well, he was born in Saint Bernard Parish in 1891 or 92. And he emerged as a political titan. And unfortunately, in order to divert attention from his business activity, he became a great champion of segregation in the 1960s. But one of the interesting things that we found is he always said that his ancestors came from California. Well, they did not. His ancestor was Juan Perez. He was born in Agüimes in Gran Canaria, settled in Saint Bernard in 1779. He was one of the colonists who could read and write. He was a warden of Saint Bernard Catholic Church before he died. One of his sons, Pedro, left Saint Bernard and moved to the West Bank in Pacaman, and there he became a rice planter. Pedro Perez's son married a Solis. Well, it turns out that Manuel Solis was one of the people who helped to give birth to the sugar industry in Louisiana with Antonio Mendes. But anyway, he had a son, Jose, from whom the whole family descends. And he married Maria Antonia Perez from Holguin in Cuba. What we've recently found out is that apparently she was an octoroon. So this, if that is correct, and it would appear it is from the DNA, that would mean that Judge Leandro Perez was himself part of Saharan Africa.
Oh, wow. We'll figure.
Well, it's just so typical here in Louisiana. You never know what you're going to find next.
Exactly.
They're blessed though that the Spaniards and the French, but particularly the Spaniards, kept magnificent civil and ecclesiastical records. So that, for instance, as we are researching the demographics of our ancestors in the islands, it will say, Felipe Luis Afonso, son of Diego Luis and Maria Colorado, born in Ico de los Vinos in Tenerife. So then we go to San Marcos Evangelista in Ico de los Vinos in Tenerife, and then we're able to trace the family back another 200 years.
Oh, wow. That's really, really amazing. It really is.
Now, in Cuba is a different problem because the records were there before Castro.
Right.
What happened, I don't know. But they had the same quality records there that we have here. And you would find that really all over the Spanish Empire.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, the Archivo General de Indias in Sevilla has all of, well, not all, but the vast majority of the records relating to the empire globally. And it's, for instance, that's where we found the ship manifest documenting the families, the head of the family, his wife, how many children, and their ages. That's how we can say that we know that over 3,000 Canary Islanders were recruited to come to Louisiana.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, that's really a very rich cultural history that I think is very important to preserve, because that's how the future generations know, where they come from, or the roots are from. That's one thing about Spanish United, is that we are culture over color, and we focus more on roots than about color, because Hispanics are not a race, we're an ethnicity, and we come in all shades of the rainbow. So I wanted to tell you, Bill, thank you so much for being on the show. I truly appreciate it. You have been a very wonderful guest. As soon as I'm done, I will definitely text you and email you the podcast. You could share it with the museum, and I look forward to the Canary Islander flag and the books for the museum.
We'll be getting you books first, and we'll get you a flag. Don't worry about that.
Thank you so much for everything, Bill. Have yourself a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, and thank you for all you are doing as well.
Not a problem. Take care. Have yourself a wonderful day.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.